to that very resentful response that we got from that one person in her big Facebook tussle. This is how she could say these things and think that she was making good argumentative points. There is proof positive that Jesus actually existed. Okay, what is it? Well, I don't have to show you. And she probably went off in a huff thinking that, well, I told them off because stories for me. Way from home.
Particularly me and my abrasiveness, my opinions, my points, my facts, my views were invalid because I was abrasive.
And the other funny thing was that after she said, like, well, I don't have any of that stuff. That's ridiculous that you even asked. You're so materialistic to even require something like that.
And I mean, don't forget that she also claimed that I demonstrated an inability to think deeply.
Yes, that you were accused of being that we were closed-minded as well. That we're very closed-minded because we require evidence in order to
accept the truth claim.
Yeah.
Another person defining open-mindedness as gullibility.
And again, then it all boils down to her having faith and not needing to prove anything to anyone.
And don't forget the tendency to just completely redefine the word faith
at whim.
Yeah, at whim, in fact, yeah.
But see, this goes back to, and I was actually just watching one of the non-staff collector videos that he had done about what it is for a Christian to be a theist to be offensive, and what it is an atheist to be offensive. This was a quote posted by a friend of ours that we all liked, and we were discussing a little bit. This theist came in, said that we were all wrong and mistaken in this when we asked for her to clarify or defend her position. We were all assholes, and we were all being rude and abrasive and closed-minded to ask her to defend her position.
And don't forget, we were being confrontational because we were in the middle of a discussion that she then crashed into the middle of, and all over the place.
I have no problem with her entering into the conversation, but if she wanted to be a part of it, then she can't just come in, make bold assertions, and have them not be challenged.
Yeah, and then run away crying, like, want to take her ball and go home. And you get that a lot. And this comes back to John Shook's original point, which is, I can tell everyone from direct experience, having done the Atheist Experience TV show for many years, we get theist callers of varying levels of intellectual sophistication calling into the show. We have had this going on for the better part of more of a decade. And even the ones who advance these more quote-unquote sophisticated defenses, sophisticated arguments, what have you, when you back them up against the wall on details, when you ask them for specifics, when you ask them to clarify a point, when you point out the presence of fallacy or an error in the whole foundational premise of the point, whatever happens, even the ones who have gotten the more sophisticated argument, even they, just like the completely unsophisticated believers like this Facebook person we're talking about, will resort to, well, it's all down to faith. Which just makes us want to say, why did you waste the last 25 minutes of our time then on the phone trying to make this big logical argument or assert this position or go on this big long tear off first causes and fine-tuning of the universe and what have you, if at the end of the day you're just going to crumble back down to, well, it's all down to faith. It's just a waste at that point. They should start there, and at that point the discussion's over because there's nothing to discuss. Because, well, I believe it because I feel like it. If that's ultimately what it boils down to, then it's even rather pointless and perhaps even a bit intellectually hypocritical of them to even be making the argument, because they've just said, well, it's not really necessary for me to think that it's arguments. I'm presenting this argument to you because I am thinking that I need to do this because you atheist materialist types want arguments and evidence and things. That's another response that we've decided to levy against anyone who brings this really complicated logical proof, or just wants to go back and regurgitate Tag or Callum or what have you. Just stop them for a minute and go, well, before we get really going into this, was this the argument that converted you to Christianity? Are you yourself a Christian because of this argument that you were about to present to us? If they're not,
then why are you presenting this one to us? Why aren't you presenting that one? If that was so persuasive, then present that argument.
Yeah. Why? Yeah. Present the thing that did persuade you that Christianity was valid, and then they'll be like, then you usually tend to get to the faith thing rather quickly, or like, well, I was raised well, fine, okay. And at any point,
or you get the experiential, the emotional, usually the emotional. Oh, I felt something. The emotional part of our brain, which is the most easily manipulated. That part.
Yeah.
And another thing that I find very irritating about Schuster, and very ignorant on his part, if I don't make sense, is that he's completely ignoring the fact that the vast majority of atheists come from atheistic background. Okay, we were religious either growing up, we were raised in I mean, especially for Americans, right? Most people are going to be raised in some kind of religious tradition. If you have Christian parents, you're going to be raised Christian. Jewish, etc., so on and so forth. I attended church right up until my adolescence. Matt Dillahunty was a strong fundamentalist Christian up until very recently. When Jeff D and I were hosting Atheist Experience, he was still a Christian at that time. So this is how recent his deconversion was.
Yeah.
When would you estimate that was?
Well, it would have had to have been in the first half of the '80s, right? So very recently, right? Because I mean, I was host of the show right up until spring of '04. So this is a recent deconversion for him. And I think that the only person
too far off myself.
Yeah, I think that the only person on the AETV cast who was a lifelong atheist is Russell Glasser.
This claim, as far as the ignorance on the subject. Now, I've encountered a couple of people out there who are like, I was raised by atheists. I don't know the Bible, so I don't talk about it. Or the concept of God, they don't understand it at all. And I've met a number of them, and they're like, I find the idea ridiculous or whatever. I was never raised this way. I don't understand it, and I don't talk about it in that respect because it doesn't. I'll stick to the science and everything, but the actual theology, I have no experience with that. And I've met quite a few people who are like that. Usually from Northern European countries, which have a fairly high incidence of non-belief.
Yeah. But Shook's point that atheists know nothing of God, nothing of religion, what have you, is patently absurd on its face when you realize that, particularly among American atheists, I would say most of us were at one point religious to one degree or another, whether we were Christian or what have you, and eventually deconverted ourselves. Atheists have been where Christians are. Most Christians have not been where atheists are.
Yeah.
And the other way to demonstrate the ridiculousness of this particular claim is replace the word God with fairies.
I was just going to say that. Like, you don't know anything about the history of fairies. You do not understand how fairies operate or how.
You don't understand fairies, and therefore you don't have to talk about fairies.
That's the thing that I find absurd about the whole thing is why, when one side is making a claim for the existence of anything, do I need to have some sort of understanding of that thing before I'm wording this really poorly, but they're saying that
expertise. Why do you have to?
But I would have to have the expertise about it first. Like that ninja that's following me. Now I tell Chris that there's a ninja that has been stealthily following me and could kill me at any second. He's in the room. I believe that he's in the room that I'm in right now. Now, if Chris does, though I'm sure Chris does, know the history of ninjas and
propensity for killing people when you drop a spoon, for example.
Yeah. He doesn't know anything about ninjas, but thinks that what I say is absurd. And I say to him, well, you just don't know anything about ninjas. You just really don't understand the ninja lifestyle.
You've never studied their history.
Yeah.
So you can't. Right. You can't tell me that my ninja doesn't exist.
Yes.
Where's your expertise in ninjas?
You don't know enough about ninjas to tell me that one isn't following me.
Now,
do you have a PhD in ninjism?
Do you have a PhD?
Now, there is a corollary to this that I think we should bring up in the interests of fairness and accuracy in all we do. That would be the question of Christians and believers who criticize science, who criticize evolution, who criticize what have you. Now, in most cases, I think that we will have to say that your average creationist to and supports the claims of evolutionary biology. That is a real field where you can actually point to real things that it addresses. Theology isn't. It's like, yeah, if evolutionary biology were talking about some stuff about which there were no examples of physical evidence whatsoever, if we were just rambling on about a thing that could just as easily exist wholly in our imaginations as anywhere else, then yeah, it would be a problem. But evolutionary biology and theology are two different disciplines. One deals in grounded reality, and the other, as far as I can tell, just deals in how do we make arguments to justify our belief in a big invisible being for which we don't have evidence. So there's a core difference there.
This is basically what I was going to say, but I was just going to word it a little bit differently.
Okay.
You have a creationist who knows nothing of science or evolution or anything. You have an atheist who has never studied any theology, and they meet on the street. All of the background of evolution is the evidence. I mean, that's what you hand to the person. When you say evolution is demonstrable, and they say, show me some evidence, you hand them the evidence.
Mm-hmm.
You hand them all of those things and all of that mountain of information. When you say to the creationist, well, show me proof of God, they don't have that.
I don't have to show you proof.
Real quick, here's the other problem. Ignorance of science, and if you decide to talk about science and you're completely ignorant about science, all you do is wind up strawmanning the positions that science actually takes. Whereas it's not necessarily the case when you talk about theology in the reverse, because usually you're taking their comments, their claims, and you can demonstrate the fallacious nature of the arguments they're presenting. That's not how it works in the reverse. They start from a false representation of what science says, and then they disassemble that straw man.
Right. Well, I just thought it was worth addressing that point to begin with, because I can very easily see someone coming along saying, well,
oh yeah,
if you're saying you don't have to be, if you're saying you don't have to be an expert in theology to disbelieve in God, well, why do I have to be an expert in biology to disbelieve evolution? Science and philosophy and theology are just different disciplines at their root. There's a different methodology there.
Here's the other thing to look at is the fact that you, Gia, myself, we are not professional biologists, yet we still have enough of a background and knowledge in it to talk about it and to discuss it. Again, we take the topics that we discuss seriously enough to actually research them, the things that we agree with and the things that we disagree with. And then you wind up with, as we're talking about, the vague theists and the ignorant theists who make claims and then can't support their claims even when it comes to their own doctrines and beliefs.
Yeah.
Let alone when it comes to the science.
Yeah, they don't study across the board. Never studied. Definitely, you would have that question be brought up of, oh, well, why would I have to know any of that stuff? Because that stuff is the evidence that demonstrates that this is true. You don't have that. Me studying religions doesn't give evidence to the existence of these things. No more evidence towards that than, I would say, Grimm's is evidence to fairies, but there isn't really a lot of fairies in Grimm's fairy tales.
No.
So.
Well, you can essentially put the problem this way. Evolutionary biology can produce the human genome, it can produce its Galapagos finches, it can produce its samples of embryology, it can produce all of this evidence from the strata, it can produce any number of hard, tangible, physical pieces of evidence to put the puzzle together, right? Creationists cannot produce their creator. And that right there is the core difference between a scientific discipline like evolutionary biology and